Okay, I'd like to introduce a longtime friend of mine, and many of you know him. I need to preface some things before he speaks that to people who have not heard him before. In the Nazarene Acts, which we've got in our library, there was a time when Nicodemus was a believer. However, through special dispensation from the apostles, he was allowed to stay within the rabbinical system, to be, in a sense, a spy for the believers, for the apostles. So he had a dispensation to stay there, even though his heart was not there. Frank Houtz ministers in many, many churches, and many, many rabbis who would perhaps be offended by certain names that would be called sacred names and different things. So he has gotten a dispensation from the Father, in a sense, and from us, because of his vision, because of mission to the churches and the congregations, to use certain names that we would find sometimes offensive, like God, Lord, and Jesus. So he has a special dispensation. You would forgive us if he has a special dispensation to use these terms. He has a habit of using them, so he doesn't slip up, in a sense, and blow his witness in those areas. He has his own conviction, trust me. But we have given him allowances to do this in this setting. You will enjoy it, and you will be blessed. And here he is.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate your understanding and the understanding of those here present and watching. I want to talk about some obvious things tonight that I think that most of you will be, will say, okay, that was really a revelation, wasn't it? But in the speaking of it, I want to lay out a pattern of facts that are really not known in the way that we mature in our reasoning. And the very first thing is that we'll say that learning begins with the simple and progresses to the complex. That's an obvious. We all know that children don't learn in the same level of thought process that adults do. And so that may seem like I'm just totally overstating something. But we found that on all things that you study, you follow the same pattern of learning on everything. It doesn't matter whether you're going to be a nuclear scientist, whether you're going to be a biologist, you continue in the same process. And so what we're going to do is discuss that process, because our study of Scripture or our study of theology, our forming of conclusions, all go on the same pattern. Now, one of the things that this could help is it could help us understand how to develop our own understanding, how to grow on our own. And it can also help us understand how somebody else has grown and where they are in their walk. And as we learn where they are in their walk, it actually helps us to be able to communicate with them. Now, I want to start with a couple of quotes. First off, my computer is not working exactly right, probably because of the let me see if I can't hide that, and maybe now we can go to the next slide. Okay, I have to do it another way. Roger Bacon says, "You cannot by reasoning correct a man of ill opinion, which by reasoning he never acquired." This is going to be a very crucial phrase as we go through this, because a lot of times we're trying to present an argument, trying to show our belief system to people who did not come to their conclusions by reason. And I'll show you how that works here in a little bit. And of course, we're here at Booker T. Washington State Park, and I want to talk a little bit about Booker T. Washington. He says, "We all should rise above the clouds of ignorance, narrowness, and selfishness." Booker T. Washington was a slave until he was 9 years old. He was released. And the next thing he tried to do with his life, because he understood that he was at a kind of a deficiency in his life because of his education level. And so he tried to get educated, which he succeeded, incidentally. He ended up going through college and got quite an education. But the process through which what he was trying to do was move from slavery to freedom. And in moving from slavery to freedom, he didn't try this through civil rights. He says, let's go after education. And education will truly deliver a person. And it worked. He was, really, why do we have a park named after him, folks? It isn't because he failed in this process. And I want to encourage everyone here in this process that I'm going to lay out. We're going to discover, in some respects, where we are in this education process. And in discovering this, we need to take one step at a time. We need to go the next step. So, we're going to start out. Subconscious learning starts at birth. You see, subconscious learning is that you witness what's going on around you, and you begin to imitate that which you see. Now, you have to realize babies do not learn everything. Some things are put in them and they're innate. You don't have to learn how to breathe. If you do, you wouldn't make it to the breathing part. So there's a lot of things that they don't have to learn. You can't teach a baby how to walk. It actually observes walking people and then begins to do what they're doing. And that's how it starts to walk. Almost every parent thinks that they're going to teach their first one to talk as quickly as they can. And the truth of the matter is that they're not going to. The baby is going to hear them speak, and sooner or later, with his own ways of imitation, say a few words. But it doesn't have anything to do with the parent teaching them. It has to do with the parent practicing that in front of them. Yeah. But after that comes conscious learning. Conscious learning usually begins in kindergarten to primary school grades. That's when they can actually discern that there is a right and wrong answer. And the right and wrong answer is related to maybe even custom. Now, let me give you an example of that. First of all, how many kids do you see at the age of 3 running around going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or singing their ABCs? Okay. They are singing their ABCs. They do not have a clue about what they're doing. You have to understand they don't know what an A is. They know what a song is, and they sing it. So we teach them this. Now, if you just went in there and you taught them how to, what an A was. An A is a sound. It's a letter of the alphabet. This represents a sound. You go through all that process, they'd be looking at you like, what are you talking about? So if you recognize that they learn their ABCs through song, they learn their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you'll notice when they're young, they'll do 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, 10, 11, 14. That's how they start counting. But they don't have that connected to anything. And see, when they go into the first grade, what they do is they take that which they've learned how to count to 10, and they connect that to objects, because objects are concrete enough for them to understand it. And so they say, 1 apple, Johnny has one apple, and Freddie has 3 apples. How many apples do Johnny and Freddie have? They don't say, what is 1 plus 3? Because it's too abstract of a thought. That 1 what plus 3 what, and what does 1 mean, and what does 3 mean, and why can't we use 8? You know, they're just totally confused by all this. So what I'm trying to point out here is that we do learn in a systematic way. And you will find out we learn everything in a systematic way. Technical learning, that's the third stage of learning. It begins in late high school through college. Now, let me tell you, most of you have probably been through Algebra 2 and trigonometry or geometry. Okay, when you go through that, what happens is that something changes in the way they grade tests. You might have a wrong answer, but they look at it and they say, oh, you did the problem right. You just came up with the wrong answer. We'll give you half credit. Wow, that's pretty unusual. Now, see, the reason is that they were wanting you to do the proof. They were wanting you to understand that you can test or
show your work.
Yeah, show your work. And so the guy who does his work right and just made an addition error, he really knows what he's doing. He just made an error in something that he knew all along, or else he couldn't even be doing the proofs. So that's when technical learning begins. When you start answering the question, why? Now see, unconscious learning, they're only giving you how. Now let me give you an example of what's going on there. My wife is one of the finest bread makers that there ever was. Unfortunately, she got gluten intolerant, and that means that I don't get bread anymore. But anyway, yeah, that's right. It is what it is. Well, anyway, she was making bread, and she was always a frustrated woman because she would make bread, and the bread would sometimes get great big holes in it, and sometimes it would just be fine, you know, nice grain. And she's going, how do you get it to be nice grain all the time? It was kind of random. Well, what was happening is she could follow a recipe. Her mother had a recipe, handed it to her. Her mother was a very well-known bread maker. And so she got mom's recipe, and that must mean that she's a good bread maker. Well, no, truth of the matter is that mother wasn't that kind of bread maker either. If you make bread at home, first thing you find out is that it is not consistent. Sometimes it doesn't rise like it's supposed to. Sometimes it raises and just blows all kinds of bubbles in it. Okay. Well, not quite. Yeah, that's good. Okay, if I can remember where I was before I found myself in this cave.
The consistency of your modified spread.
Yeah. Well, what happened was that somebody came along and decided to make a donation to my wife. Wanted her to have her own wheat grinder. And so they brought us this really nice wheat grinder over to the house. And in the process, brought us a book that was called The Art of Bread Making. Well, what we discovered is that environment is 90% of consistency. You see, you need temperature control to have equal bread making. You have to have humidity control. You have to have ingredients that are properly measured. For instance, you won't find a, if you go out to a bread store or something like that where they make bread, you won't find them using a cup of flour. They're going to use a kilogram or things like that because they want it all very evenly mixed. So it'll be the exact same every time. You see, a cup is volume, and it can be packed or it can be loose. And so the volume doesn't work. You have to have a weight. And so anyway, she learned all these tricks, and suddenly she had consistent bread. Now, a friend of ours, it was funny, he's a bread maker. Okay? He did it commercially, all that. And so he came in and started making comments about how you do this and make a consistency to it. He actually made bread in his home for many years and sold it over a 3-state area, delivering bread, and it was always consistent. Well, that's because he knew how to control the environment, or if the environment changed, he knew to change the ingredients to fit. You see, that's the thing that most people in their homes don't know. They don't know, okay, if you put a little bit too little salt, this happens. You put a little too much salt, this happens. Okay, that's all technical learning. A recipe tells you how, but technical learning is needed before you do it in a professional way. You have to be able to bring it together with the environment working. So, technical level says why. Answers the question why. Okay, consider the learning required for your own profession or study. This should reveal your highest level of thought. Now, I want you to know that in all the different professions that you all may represent here, all of them can probably be brought to the technical level. Okay, but just because you are in a profession doesn't mean you're approaching things from a technical level. It kind of depends how you were taught, how you were trained. Furthermore, you are not trained on everything in a technical level. So what ends up happening is that you're going to have a variation of knowledge. Maybe you may be on the technical level in engineering, let's say, but you're really still in first and second grade when it comes to languages. Maybe you aren't even that high, because most language is taught on subconscious learning. And so you aren't first grade just because you speak a language. Now you may be, but you may not be. People would come to me when I went over to Israel about 3 or 4 years ago. I went with somebody in our congregation. And they said, "Oh man, I'm glad I'm going with Frank because he speaks Hebrew." And I'm going, no. Do not confuse the fact that I could translate the Tanakh with that I speak Hebrew. I had absolutely no subconscious learning on Hebrew, which of course that meant that some of the letters, which I can read and pronounce correctly, when they say it, I don't see the letters. And actually, I am totally visual with Hebrew, and unless I'm seeing the letters, I don't know what word it is. And so, with Lee just a few minutes ago, I asked him how to spell the words that he had written down that were transliterated. I asked him to spell it in Hebrew. And the reason I did that was I wanted to distinguish between the various ways that it's transliterated into English, because there's a wide range of the way things are transliterated. There's nothing standard about it. And so I knew if I had the Hebrew letters, I would know what it was saying. But with the transliteration, well, it kind of depends on who did the transliteration. So recognize that it's unlikely you will think on all subjects to the degree of abstract thinking that you do in your own profession. In other words, you're going to be at your highest level in what you consider to be your greatest study. It may just be your greatest interest. A lot of people are really interested in particular things, and therefore they study it, and they may have no degree or anything like that. And we're not talking about degrees. We're talking about interest and the degree of complexity that you analyze the subject with. So, what's that?
Like growing herbs.
Right. Yeah, anything. It goes to anything. A person can only understand things presented to him if he is on the stage he is accustomed to thinking. Believe it or not, if someone presents something 2 stages above, and we're going to talk about these stages here in a little bit, but if he goes 2 stages, he skips one, there is no comprehension whatsoever, and what they do is they take the information you give them and reinterpret it on the level that they are accustomed to thinking. And so you may think you're communicating, but you find out they haven't got a clue about what you're saying.
It's like skipping a grade.
That's right. Well, sometimes you can skip a grade because you've studied or you've done something else. But if you skip a grade and all they did was put you on another level, you don't have the basis to build on. Okay. So if we want to help a person grow, we can only present information from one stage above his present stage of abstract thinking. That means you can only go one step at a time. So you're wanting to help them grow, you want to take them the next step. Okay, now let me tell you what happens often in the Hebrew Roots movement. They get a piece of information that is definitely not on the level that the people they're telling about this piece of information to, and they try to jerk them exactly to where they are at this present time. You've got to understand this like I do.
Yes.
All that does is give people whiplash.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you broke their neck because, and believe me, they think you're the devil for it. It does not help because they cannot understand what you're getting at. They've got to have the basis that you do for understanding the information. So if you don't start bringing them along at the very beginning for them and help them take the steps, then you are incapable of communicating with them. And to be honest with you, if you're incapable of communicating with them, you should not.
Wow.
Because what you will do is you will cause them more confusion. They will demonize you. They will say, oh man, they're crazy. They're thinking about things that, you know, they're all going to hell, first of all. You know, that's what's going across their mind. And so if you don't know how to do this, stop doing it, please, because those who do are then having to overcome what's already been done wrong.
Oh, no. Absolutely.
And you have to start at the very beginning. And you have to first convince them that the people who were there before maybe were sane, but didn't know how to present the topic. And that's going to be real hard. So anyway, yes.
They started out thanking God for everything he made. Stephen stood up and did it there. Over and over and over.
We have to learn how to build a foundation before we can put up the walls. And if you're starting with the roof first, trust me, that only works if you've got a very good engineer. All right. Here is a graph that I use to show that we can have very varying degrees of understanding. You know, what's that? Yes. Okay. In this graph, I have linguistics, and I have it to the instruction stage where you start getting instruction on the conscious level. Some people get a little bit about linguistics, but then the next one we have geometry. I have that up in the testing stage, and I'll give you these terms here as we go on, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about by being on the testing stage. And then engineering, this person I have up there on the compilation stage. What I am doing with these things is showing you that they've gone to school. If you'll notice, an engineer typically knows a lot of math. So we have geometry and calculus, knows some physics. Yes, that's on pretty high. biology and chemistry, because engineers do have to take the sciences. But if you look at other things, you'll find out linguistics are pretty low on. Food preparation, this shows that this person is definitely a bachelor, or his wife does all the cooking, you know? He is not going to eat if he's left alone. Yeah. Fast food, that's right. You've got it figured out. Okay, child rearing. Oops, maybe a bachelor or early married, but it does not have any children yet, because there's, that's on pretty low schedule there. Psychology. This person could be hard to deal with. Now, the truth of the matter is, we're dealing with fiction here. I'm just trying to give you an idea. The farther they are away on this graph, in other words, if they are, sorry, I pushed the wrong button. If they have great distances, they're not going to develop equally, but they will be very disturbed. They will be volatile. A really nice flat graph makes people pretty unique. They're naive. They won't be reacting to everything. They'll be rather naive, but they at least are not volatile. But you put them up there where there's something that they're thinking pretty highly on, and they're thinking pretty low over here, they're volatile. This will explain why at times when you get with someone, okay, I'll try to give again, these are not real examples. I'll just try to give you examples to be able to communicate with them. Let's say you were working with the church, and the minister of the church was hearing some of the things you said, and yeah, they're kind of getting it. And then you say one thing, you got no clue why, but all of a sudden they go ballistic. And you're thinking, I've never heard this person go like this before. They've always been so polite and kind to me, and now they're just off the wall crazy. Okay, that's actually cognitive dissonance. You can push them too far and they react. And what happens is that when you start presenting information above the level of reasoning that they do, they have the cognitive dissonance, they reinterpret, and they either demonize or deify the person who's giving the information. Yeah. Let me give you a hint. In America, deify never happens.
Right on.
Yeah. You probably will never do that, but I'm not trying to say everybody's real low. Okay, what happens is in theology, there's something that's added to the mix, which I'm going to call force. And that force. And that force is crucial to bringing real confusion into the issue. So I'll explain that in a little bit. Okay, the greater differences between the disciplines, the greater the cognitive dissonance. The person graphed above is very troubled due to the great variation in abstract thought. Now, I have been able to have very good conversations with business leaders, with various people, and suddenly they react on theology. Okay, now the reason they're reactive on theology is because they're not thinking as high in theology. Have you ever had a doctor or a lawyer that you're discussing things with, and everything's, you can discuss law, and man, it's real easy with that, and you're the stupid one because you didn't study it, or something like that. But then you get off on theology, and oh man, they're ready to take you out and stone you. And you go, what's wrong here? They didn't study theology like they did law. That's what's wrong. So, I'm going to start out here and show you a graph. You'll notice I have on this graph subconscious. I have on there that you answer the questions who, what, and where on the subconscious level. On the conscious level, you answer the question how. And on the technical section, you answer the question why. If you will notice, I have all these terms that are kind of lightly put in there: perception, comparison, instruction, reason, testing, compilation. Now, I'm going to call those the 6 building blocks, or the 6 stairs that you walk up in order to get to your more complex understanding. But each one of them are 3-dimensional. So we're going to break this down into a 3-dimensional staircase here in a minute. And you'll kind of see what I mean. You start out on the perception at one place. Actually, perception is the change that happens in you. So at first, you don't perceive. And so let's talk about that a little bit. We call that innate. A baby first considers his mother to be an extension of himself. You know, when a baby's born, been with mom all along. And so why would he consider her anything different? And so to him, mom is him. Now he has to grow out of that. So we're going to break that into a 3-dimensional graph. And I'll try to show you how this works into our understanding. Subconscious level becomes 3-dimensional. Now, we're going to answer the who, what, where in this graph. So the first part of it, which is the innate, is instinct driven. Okay, God just gives us the information. The second part is where we learn to differentiate. So we call that differentiation. So at first, the baby thinks it and mother are the same. The baby probably thinks everything is the same because it cries, everybody in the room stands up to go get it something. You know, it just, everything is there to serve it. Now, you might recognize the term egocentric. Egocentric is I-centered. As a child, when it is born, it is egocentric. Now, you all know that if you find an egocentric adult at 35 years of age, that they are considered to be very immature. We're supposed to grow out of it. I'm going to go through the maturation process here and show you what it means to grow out of it. You have to take these steps in order to grow out of it. So, you have to first become self-aware. The people who are egocentric on past never really understand that the other, the person that they are not aware of, or that they never understand that they aren't there just to serve them. And so that's why, as adults, you look at them and go, oh, brother, you know, let's stay away from them because they're going to want me to service them like they were some sort of privileged individual. So, everything is observational, as we said earlier in this level. So if it's observational, you have to observe, first of all, you have to observe differentiation. So we start out with the innate, like I mentioned before, but this, through observation, we will discover that we are not the center of the universe. Okay, innate is egocentric, as we've already stated. But when we become aware, we actually move to another stage. Now, most of you have seen babies. They're all like this as far as I've noticed. At about 2 to 3 months of age, you'll suddenly discover that they're out there with their hand in front of them, and they're going, and they're moving their hand back and forth. What they're doing is they're discovering that they can move, and they can cause it to come in and go out at their will. Now, they have been crying, and mom has been going in and out at their will. But you know what? She gets over it. When a baby is 4 months old, it doesn't work quite as well. When they're 6 months old, it hardly works at all. When they're 3 years old, the baby can just forget it because by then mom has had it and she's not going to be serving every little detail this kid wants just because it squeaked. So that awareness that comes to them, I call ecto-ado. Now, ecto-ado is the word, it's basically recognizing the other. It's recognizing that there is another. You see, at first he doesn't even recognize there is another. So the first differentiation he has to do is to recognize that mom and dad and brother and all those are not them. They're not him. I'll do it that way. So one must become ecto edo before he can progress to the next level. Okay, now, by the way, the word ecto, we're going to use this a little bit. It just means the other, the outsider, the one that is not him in this case. But later we're going to apply it in another word, in another manner. And so, next thing is you have to learn how to associate. Now, in a congregational setting, I don't know, many of you were probably raised in a church setting, a synagogue or something, where you all came together. Got to realize, little baby gets taken to this situation, they sit there and they watch what happens going on around them. I like to give examples of a little Methodist boy who goes there and you see what he sees first is somebody going down the aisle with this fire on the end of a stick. And every boy loves fire on the end of a stick. And so it really gets his attention. And so he's walking down the thing, carrying the fire, and they go up and they light the candles. Okay, what's a 5-year-old going to think? They're going to say, how can I get to do that? I like fire, you know? And not only that, they're going to think, ooh, I can go down the aisle and I can go and light Mrs. So-and-so's hair and, you know, okay. Doesn't work that way. And you see, mom says, okay, first of all, you have to be at least 12 before you can do that. And second of all, you have to go through training because we don't want you setting the church on fire while you're doing that. See, that's what they're thinking. Now, in Messianic congregations, we have our ceremony with the children. I remember when the girls were very young and we would light the candles together before Sabbath, the little girls always wanted to go up there with mother and do that. And so it was a way that they could feel a part of it. And usually they got to, because since mother was there and could control the situation, a 5-year-old going up and going through the same motions was not a problem. And we usually let them do that. Okay, but I'm getting ahead of myself here by giving you the next slide.
Take your time.
When one is in this position, he becomes what we call hemi-centric. Now, you have to realize that ego is a Greek word. And when you're egocentric, that means I'm I-centered. Hemis is a Greek word. Hemis is the plural. It is including yourself and those you're talking to. So we will call it we'll call it we for English, or us. So this becomes us-centered or we-centered. Okay, that means that we recognize our group. This is our group right here. This is us. Okay, when you recognize your group, what you start to do is distinguish. You'll notice we're going to do a differentiation here. You distinguish between your group and the other groups. Now, it depends on how far you want to put your boundaries out there. You know, some people may put it out and say, well, we're going to be just those of us who meet Sukkot this week, and then there's all those other people. Or we're going to say, well, we understand that there's different calendars, and we're going to include those other people, but we just know they're all going to hell or something, you know? And then there's the group that would say, well, we're going to include the church in this because that's where we all came from. So they're inclusive there, but exclusive of Muslims and Jews. And then there's the ones that will say, well, we'll include the Jews, but, you know, it depends on where you draw your boundary. And I'm not here to tell you where to draw the boundary. I'm just telling you that the next stage is to be able to draw a boundary between you and the rest of the group. Now, let's say that it's a Baptist church. And the reason I'm giving examples in the church, because you've got to understand most of us came from there. And in the process of us coming from there, it's the way they're thinking that's in our history. And believe it or not, we sure have a whole lot of that left in us. And so somebody in a Baptist church would say, well, we Baptists, we're okay. Or let's maybe put it, Southern Baptists are okay. But we're not too sure about the Northern Baptist, which incidentally, for those of you who don't know, there is a Northern Baptist.
Yes.
And Seventh-day Baptist, yeah, we can actually get carried away here just with Baptist and free will Baptist. I mean, we can just go on and on. But anyway, you have your little limits on who you're going to associate with. But certainly, we're not going to associate with the Churches of Christ because you see. Okay, I heard the Church of Christ guy over there laughing. So
Baptists all have choirs and music.
Right. We can't have anything to do with those Church of Christ people because they don't have a piano, and certainly they can't sing and sing. Now, just to let you know, I'm not picking on anybody else. I grew up Church of Christ, so I do too. But I got over it. No, there's a lot of godly people in all of these denominations. They really want to serve our Father. The only problem is that sometimes we're not trained on all the details.
Yes.
And we probably have some things that would help them, and they may have some things that would help us. I know it's hard for us to believe that they might, but I'll tell you what, little Church of Christ that I grew up in, we had gone out of the Church of Christ for many years. But we decided that we were supposed to go back and work with the congregation. We had a Messianic congregation at the time, guys. So it wasn't that we were saying, well, we believe everything you do. It's just we felt like we were supposed to go back and work with them. And if there's one thing that the Church of Christ will tell you, prove everything by Scripture. Okay? I credit them with making me prove everything by Scripture, and actually it gave me a really good lesson on trying to express what the New Testament says that's being misunderstood. And believe it or not, in the group I was with, they were very receptive because I did prove it all by Scripture. And so they might have disagreed with me, but they weren't going to say that I was totally off base because it did work. And so I got a lot of respect from them. And of course, you can only get respect if you give respect.
Amen.
And so we have to learn to respect those who have not come to the degree of understanding that we have. Now, I got to get going because I've only gotten through a little bit of this, and it's supposed to be done in 2 sessions. And at this rate, we're not going to get there. So, no, I'm sorry. I don't have a handout. The next place that you go to is becoming ecto-edo-hema-centric. Now, what that means is that you're recognizing the other, the one that is not a part of your group, but you still know who we are. We are this group, they are that group. Now, this is all subconscious learning. Nobody teaches you this. You pick it up. Your children pick it up. It's being in with the group. You will find out, you'll start distinguishing who is and who is not with the group. It's just natural. But we got to grow past that because this is all just subconscious. Now, guys, you're still learning subconsciously today. Okay? You never quit learning subconsciously. It's just that you have to build upon your subconscious learning. So next we're going to go to the conscious level of learning. Conscious level of learning answers the question, how? So let's look at it. You've got to go to instruction first to be able to answer the question, how? And a lot of times you recognize that, well, let's put it this way. We all know our ABCs. We may not know our alphabet, but we do know our ABCs, okay? So how many of you are still sing when you go through a dictionary? You know, you still sing the ABC? I do, you know. Every once in a while, you know, you're starting in the middle. Where's Q? Oh, there it is, you know. Okay. So anyway, you're still singing the song. Okay, that you learned on subconscious learning. But now you know what to do with it. See, when you learned the song, you had no clue what to do with it. And so, why is it it's not A, B, G? Well, yeah, it doesn't. You notice but that actually fits the alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Okay, get the Greek. Alpha, beta, gamma. Okay. Oh, and what does Gimel mean? Yeah, camel. Yeah, okay. Camel. How do we say it? Do we say gamel? No, we say camel. You'll notice our C comes in the exact same place. So, why is it in this order? It's because we all agreed for it to be in this order. Why couldn't we put A, B, F? Well, you could. The only problem is all society has C after B. Therefore, if you put F after B, you can't even use a dictionary. So maybe you need to learn how the society understands things. Oh yeah, it would mess up a lot of stuff. So you got to learn how society does things in order to let that continue. So what we're doing is it's resuscitation. Recitation. Yeah, I'm gonna bring them back to life as best I can. Guys, I don't know why I'm having a problem with that, but for some reason here this last week, I picked up resuscitation. When I say it, just forgive me. I'm talking about being able to recite something, not being able to bring life back to it. But anyway, you can recite something. It's ingrained in you because that's the way your culture does it. That is the first dealing with conscious teaching. There is a right and a wrong, not because you couldn't do it another way, but because you don't. Okay? And so if you write down F, A, B, F, the teacher's going to mark it as wrong. And you are going to recognize, okay, the teacher knows, therefore for me to get a good grade, I got to put a C there. Now, that goes into further understanding. I don't know if you all think you add in your mind or not. This is memorization. 1 + 4 = 5. You memorize that. You are not going 1 + 4 = 5. You're not having to go to the concrete in order to figure this out. Concrete thought. You actually memorize it. You memorize your multiplication tables. Okay, see, they taught you to memorize this stuff. Okay, now, when you start doing algebra, here's the trick. In algebra, you can move the question around. 1 + x = 5. Okay, so now you got to isolate your x. And so you take the 5, you move a -1 here because you want to remove it from this side. And move a -1 over here, so you have x = 5 - 1, and then you come up with x = 4, because you can do the math. So you isolate things. You can isolate 2 questions with algebra. And so it becomes something where you can expand upon your knowledge. That, again, is going beyond the first stage, the mapping side of it, where you've been able to recite it, but you're learning the technique in moving it from one side to the other. So this side actually deals with technique, or this level deals with technique. So how far should we go? It's 8:15. Jackson, it's because we got started a little late. Do I need to go on, or should we? Oh, don't do that to me. I'll be here all night. Okay, we'll put on another 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got me down here.
So, good. So here we look at it. You're in the conscious level of how. Let's see how that expands. First of all, here you are hemi-centric. That means that we are we-centered. Just because you went up to the next level doesn't mean you changed anything. We have to learn how to change how to expand our reasoning capability. Keep in mind that right now, hemi-centric, you are socially, but you are on a yes and a no answer. It's black and white. Now, you got to understand, if you're on the black and white analysis of any subject, you are on first grade. Okay, if you're only comparing whether it's right or wrong. That's how first graders through third graders understand everything. It's either right or wrong. So it's yes or no, or a lot of people say they only see black and white, they never see gray. Okay, now if you're one of those people who only see black and white and never see gray, this is where you are. Now this is not bad. I'm not trying to tell people that that you're therefore a bad person. This is where we are at times. And in fact, you will find very, very scholarly people on this level on something. So, yes. Yeah. Right, but you'll also discover that the reason they're black and white is because they're right here, and I can show you why that happens. Okay, let's go see how this breaks out. First of all, here's a clue that you need to get a hold of. This is shame-driven. Now, I'm going to have to define shame and distinguish it from guilt. Shame, first of all, is externally policed for the individual. In other words, I have nothing to do with the shame. Somebody around me is the one who is shaming me. Okay? In other words, oh, you did that wrong. Okay, see, that is your environment shaming you. And of course, we just came out of everything being environment-oriented. And so your environment is still hanging on. We haven't learned how to stand on our own 2 feet, so to speak. Okay, but it is internally policed for the group. In other words, there is somebody within the group that gets to determine what we should be shamed of. But the interesting thing is the one who gets to determine what we should be shamed of is not shamed by the group. It's because they are the authority. So therefore, it's external for the individual, internal for the group. Now let's look at the next thing. You can go to the next level and you do a maturation process, and that means you become ectosunicystic. Ecto is that word again, which is the outsider or the other, and sunesis is the Greek word for understanding.
So it's ecto-sunicystic.
Yeah, ectosunicystic. Yes. Okay. Now that means that we understand the other, folks. This is where we have a major breakdown. People don't understand what ectosunicism is, and because they don't understand what ectosunicism is, they are not going to get very far in dealing with other groups, in dealing with people who are not just exactly like them. I'm going to say that you cannot argue. In fact, you can't even make a choice in doctrine until you understand the doctrines well enough, the opposing doctrines, well enough to be able to fight for either side of it at any given time. I should be able to drop a quarter, and you should be able to take one side, and someone else in the room take the other side, and you all debate, and then I should be able to drop another quarter, and you all should be able to switch. Okay? That is understanding the other. And when you understand it well enough that everybody who believes like that other position will say, oh yeah, you're explaining that perfectly. That is when you have matured enough to make a choice between two options. Now, incidentally, that's just maturing enough to make a choice between two options. But if you stop on the level of only having two options, right here is where you stay. So, ectosunicism is guilt-driven. It is exactly the opposite of shame. Let me explain to you how I'm using this. Guilt-driven is internally policed for the individual. In other words, you only know whether you're guilty or not. But it's externally policed for the group. In other words, the laws apply to the leader as much as it applies to you. Now, let's think about this for a second. Shame-driven. A person tells the people that they can go out and get a special place in heaven if they send their babies out to or if they take themselves and go blow up the enemy. Okay? Have you ever seen the leaders doing that?
No.
Okay? The leader of the PLO today blew himself up. You will never see that happen because it's a shame culture that they're dealing with. Okay? It's because the leaders don't sit under the same, they aren't judged in the same way. They're not subject to the law. So guilt-driven, okay, what we're saying is there is a law that God made, or that Yah made, and you all have to meet those standards. Okay? It's external, isn't it? The leaders have to meet it too. Okay, that's guilt-driven. Now, that is the first step in being able to become ectosoonicystic. It isn't the only step. Just because you understand that that it applies to everybody does not mean that you're ectosoonicystic. In fact, if you can't argue their point for them, you're not ectosoonicystic. Now, it's not common that you get there on this stage. You normally have to go up to the transforming location before you actually become ectosoonicystic. And so we'll talk about that now in the methodical stage. Okay, methodical. Methodical means that you have developed a methodology that will allow you to come to conclusions. It's a step beyond reciting everything. It's given you methods to follow. And so methods you don't find necessarily in division or multiplication, but you start to find methods when you are isolating the question. Remember when I was mentioning it earlier that in algebra, you learn how to isolate the question. Well, you have to learn the rules for being able to isolate the question. So you move the X around wherever you want the question, or and then you can do maybe two questions at once, an A and a B. You can answer both of them with the information you already have. Sometimes you have to answer A before you answer B because you need the answer there to be able to fill in the next blank. So you have this method that is being taught. Now here is where the church has fallen down. Okay, this is the problem right here. You see, the church is developed on a shame culture because the leadership of the church tells you when you've stepped outside of the boundaries of what they accept. They have a doctrine that's laid out here, and if you step outside of that doctrinal thing, you are separated from the church. Now get this, you cannot teach in this church until what? You have gone through all the questions properly. They teach you in their Sunday school. You answer all the questions right. And then they say, oh, so-and-so would be a good teacher. Right? Now, if you answered all the questions wrong, if you were silly enough to ask the question, well, why do we do this on Sunday and not on, some other time? Okay, if you ask that question, you just got separated from the group who's going to teach next, okay? That is a shame culture. In fact, if you think too far outside of the box, you'll find yourself totally out of the box because they will kick you out of the box. Okay? You see how the shame culture works. I'm going to separate you from all of your friends and all those people you've known all your life, and I'm going to call you the devil because you are not following protocol according to what we say protocol should be. Right. So, this is where the problem comes in because that's force. That is an external force that is affecting what you believe. You now don't have to judge according to whether or not it's true or not, or whether or not evidence supports it. You have to do this because you will be separated from the other. Or you will become the other. You will be separated from them. Okay. So you might be able to learn a method in the church, but they don't want to teach you the method, because why do they need to? They've got you trapped in the doctrine, because if you think outside of the doctrinal status, you're in trouble. All right. So if you transfer differently rather than going the methodical first, I'll call this the multiplicity thing. What you have, a multiplicity step. You learn that others do things differently. And so you may, if you're a Baptist, you may learn that the Methodists don't especially agree with you. You may expand beyond that. You may find out the Presbyterians do something different or whatever. But, you know, you're learning that there is more than one way to compile the information. Now, you guys, you got this down, because I noticed that you could probably still debate on calendars in this group. You could probably, and you still love each other. All right, you've actually realized there may be another way of doing it, but we don't have to separate it. Okay. That is learning how to accept a multiplicity. See, you can't accept a multiplicity if everybody has to agree exactly the same. Now, right. Right. So we have to be able, and you know, you all even would let me come and talk, even though I might say a word or two that's not, you know. What's that? Oh. Okay, thanks. All right. So there are two ways in which you can grow. You can grow either going to the methodical or the multiplicity stage. And then one learns alternative systems and processes. Incidentally, you start learning some of this stuff in first grade. Do you remember the abacus?
Oh gosh, I hate it.
Yeah. Okay, well, the abacus was actually saying this is how the Chinese did it. Okay, but they're using that to say, look, we have a ones column, we have a tens column. You know, okay, they're doing the same thing, notice, but they're showing you a different way. So they kind of introduce you to the idea, and it's with the hope of you being able to grow through that. Most people make it in mathematics. Okay, the question is, can we make it in theology? Now, when you have that external force that's keeping us there, the answer is no. You are not going to make it in theology, because that external force has been added. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to go on with this, and I'm going to show you what happens when people start giving you technical information, but you don't learn ecdysunicism. You don't learn how to see the other. And it's very obvious. You can see people doing this in society all around us. We actually have the potential of understanding why they're reacting the way they do. And in the fact, you may have the ability to even help them through that. And it can be volatile. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow.
Very good.
Wow.
For you guys, you're saying don't know what they must do.
That is correct. And what he was dealing with was a shame culture that had gone out of control.
Right.
You understand that they had all these answers laid down. It's going to be this way, this way, this way. And so what was happening? We were having a violent reaction. And what he was responding to was, they don't understand this. They don't realize that incidentally, what Yeshua was doing was trying to set them free. Okay, they were actually enslaved to their own theology. And so when you are learning this, you actually can be set free, because you can back yourself in corners with your theology, and suddenly you go, I can't take a step. If I do this, I'm wrong. If I do that, I'm wrong. And so as you are able to expand your understanding and realize maybe it's not just this or that, maybe there's several options here, then it frees you up to think outside of the box and to be able to come to good conclusions that are not so rigid and stuck where you are, I should say. So incidentally, since we all were raised probably in the church, I don't know about everyone here, but I'm going to say that you were, just for the sake of saying it. You were stuck on the reciting stage, and you got a question or two outside of that, and you took a step, but that step doesn't make you think totally on the next stage. It makes you be daring enough to take the step. Okay, it takes about 7 years to become comfortable thinking on the new stage. And then that will be your base ground of how you think. Now, it's not the only, you may take information and think above that ever so often, but generally, you're going to return to your most secure spot. And this right here is, most Messianics or Hebrew roots people return to the recitation stage, okay, because that's where we're the most comfortable. And what we need to do is learn how to get beyond that. And I think we have a methodology here that can teach that. And as we expand beyond it, we can actually take a lot of the volatility out of our own movement.
Yeah, this is you got a question? Okay.
Well, here, that may be, this teaching may be the fix for the polarization in the movement, because what you described tonight, you stand back and one of the fellowship groups and congregations, you can see exactly what you're talking about. You see exactly what you're talking about.
Where,
how it's affecting the body.
What level do you find polarization on? You see, we just went over it. Polarization is 1st to 3rd grade teaching. Okay, for us to get beyond polarization, we have to be beyond 1st to 3rd grade teaching. This is not to be insulting. Okay, don't take it as Frank's trying to say I'm in the 3rd grade. Okay, what I'm trying to say is our reasoning capability has to be taught to us. We have to be able to expand, and it has to go systematically. The problem is that in order to keep cohesiveness in the church, they added the shame culture, not intentionally. They didn't say, oh, I'll come up with a shame culture here. No, they very well defined what it took to get kicked out. And so when they had all these things to get kicked out for, or to be disassociated from, you don't believe in internal security, you're out of here. Okay, well, then you knew not to say that you didn't believe in eternal security. Okay, that didn't mean you didn't believe in something other than eternal security. It means you knew not to say it. And so what it does is it makes people hide what they're thinking. Okay, now I'm going, but you all keep asking me questions or making comments. We'll keep on going, but I mean.
I have a question for another. You talked about shame and guilt complexes. What do you see? We know that the church is a shame deal. Do you see the Hebrew roots and Messianics as the same way?
Absolutely. Now let me give you an example here of an answer that can be given by the leadership that would not be ashamed. Okay, I'm just going to use this as an example. Is this okay? I'm not really wanting to go over. I'm getting asked questions. Okay. Okay. Let's say somebody came in and said to me, Frank, is it okay for me to buy a pop on the Sabbath? Okay? Now, the thing is that they're going to buy it in a pop machine or something like that. In our congregation, we met in a church for many years, and in that church, they had a little bucket that they set on top of the refrigerator, and you were allowed to go buy out of the refrigerator a pop and put a quarter, guys, in the little can on the top, and that's what they bought their next pop with. It wasn't to make money. It was strictly to kind of be able to pay for putting it there. Okay. So now the question is am I making somebody work by putting a quarter in there on the Sabbath? Okay, somebody said no. No. Okay, no. We got another no.
It's got to buy and sell.
You got to buy in and sell. Okay. Okay. He's liberal.
I'm conservative.
Okay. All right. Now, when people would come and ask me if it was wrong to do that, I would say, "Oh, that's between you and God." Okay, but I'll tell you what I do if you want to know. And incidentally, because I am not a liberal. No, I'm just kidding. I told people that, I say, well, if I was going to do that, I'd put the money in before sunset. Go ahead and take care of it. And that way, I know my whole family would go put $1. Sometimes they put $10 and forget where they were and have to put another $10 in. But anyway.
Another way they prepay.
Yeah, they prepay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Now, on the other side of it, is it wrong for you to do that? Well, if I tell you it's wrong, then I have developed a shame culture. And it's not between you and God. What I'm telling you is you got to come to me to find out what's from God. And if you don't do what I say, then I'm sorry, you're out of here. You're not.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay. Does the Messianic movement do that?
Yes. They do both.
And as long as we are stuck on trying to tell everybody how they have to walk out every commandment, we're actually dealing with it the same way Yeshua, when he addressed the Pharisees, he was saying, you put things on the shoulders of men too heavy to bear.
Yeah.
Okay, because they had it all figured out. By the way, I'm not knocking Pharisees. We could have a long talk about that, but what I'm pointing out is that Yeshua was wanting to free people from a whole lot of determination.
6,000 years we've been going around this time.
Right. We've been going back and forth. So all I'm trying to say with this is, yes, as long as we're approaching it that way, we're on the lower level. Now, when we learn to leave it up to God, and what we're doing, see, when you tell them that's between you and God, who are we leading them to?
Now they have to deal with it.
We're leading them to a relationship between them and God, not with a relationship between them and me.
I got you.
Okay? What are we supposed to do as leaders? We're supposed to lead them into a relationship with God, not us.
Always pointing to
Right.
Yes, I see that.
Right. So our shame culture is counterproductive to our growth. In fact, it keeps us from doing that.
Got you.
Okay? Thank you all very much. I'll sit around here and talk all night.
So what's next? What's our next? I think it might be tomorrow, or Jackson's going to do something actually.
Hey guys, we're going to do the night owl at
9:15 for the night owl. So those on Zoom who want to hear that, come back on at 9:15. You got a little break. And this was a great teaching. I just wish there was a way we could make this appear on everybody's computers all at once, all around the world, everybody in the Messianic movement. Thank you, guys. Shalom. Talk later. Yahweh bless.